Hello everybody, welcome back to another video by Jay Bowman. Today is a bit of a different video. If you've been watching this channel for a while, you'll be aware that for a long time I've had an ongoing quest to try and find the best small, compact, portable FM synth to take away with me when I'm away from home, away from the studio, to do sound design on and make music with. And the reason I'm making this video is because I've just come back from a trip and I think I've solved my quest. So that's what I want to talk about in this video. Now, spoiler alert, you can see here the MPC Live II in the shot, and it's probably worth saying at this point that this was a part of the solution. So I just came back from a trip and I did take the MPC Live II away with me. I'll say that an hour before I left, I had a lot of gear on the table and was trying to work out what I actually wanted to take. So I'll just put the MPC Live to the side for a minute just to show some of the other options. So the MPC Live II has a lot of plus points, which is the reason I took it, but let's talk about some of the other options. So here I'll show my little Tascam DP006, which I've had for years now, possibly 8, 9, 10 years, I can't remember exactly. And this is a great little portable 4-track studio. I've used it for hundreds and hundreds of hours worth of recordings. It's got very, very basic functionality. So you can bounce tracks. It's got two mono tracks, 2 stereo tracks. It's got 2 inputs. It's got built-in mics, which is a nice feature, although it's not one I ever use. And you can bounce tracks. So that's basically the situation. It sounds great, it's nice and portable, it's tiny compared to the MPC, just to show you that. Size-wise, it's kind of less than a quarter of the size, nice and light. It's got a tripod mount as well, actually, on the back. Obviously it's battery powered, 4 AAs. So in some ways it's a great solution, very portable for recording. But it has a few downsides. Obviously there's no MIDI on this. So for multi-tracking, that's fine if you can line everything up manually, but it's got no MIDI for starting and stopping recordings. It's got no built-in sequencer, obviously, and it's got no advanced editing functions. So you can't copy and paste from one track to another. You can't do a lot of the things which make it possible on the more advanced recorder like the DP24 ST, which I've got in front of me, to make a full album on. It's very difficult to do that with this unless you're just doing one take recordings and doing it that way. So for that reason I decided I wasn't going to take the DP006, because although it's small and portable, if I take this, I need to take other things with me, or accept that I'm going to do a lot of post-production work when I get back to try and turn raw recordings into something more useful. So I left that at home. So I took the Live II from that perspective as a recording device, because obviously it has the sampler for recording external devices into. Once you've got your samples into the MPC Live, you can track them using the step recorder here. You can mix them, you can pan them, you can do everything you need to, basically. So as a recording device, the Live II does everything this does and much more. So I thought this was going to be rather frustratingly limited, the Tascam would be. Whereas the Live II, this is basically what I use in my studio at home, so by taking this I'm not missing out on anything. So there's that issue with the Tascam versus the Live II. The Live II is a recording device, so that's that. Then I was also thinking about what I would take to sequence things with. So as well as the Live II, we've got this Arturia key step, which I've only recently got actually. I got it for Christmas last year, and I do like this a lot. Again, it's small and portable for a keyboard. It's actually got a built-in sequencer with it, and I've seen other people use the sequencer, and to me it looks like it's great for live recording, tweaking, etc. It's got an ARP as well. It's small, light, portable, USB powered. It's got full MIDI, you can see there, as well as various other sync options. So in theory this would be great to take with me, and I do like having a keyboard. The only thing that dissuaded me from taking it is actually space was rather limited. So even though for a keyboard it's a very small size, you can see that it is wider than the MPC. I wasn't sure how much space I would have when I got to my destination for making music with. And in some ways, although I like having a keyboard, it's a bit of a luxury. The MPC Live II has the pads, obviously, and I much prefer playing a keyboard to playing pads, but you can just about make it work if you're with a bit of effort. And so in terms of note entry, the MPC Live, it doesn't win over the key step, but it is an acceptable compromise. Then also in terms of sequencing, obviously the Live II is much more advanced than the key step. It has, it has this grid editor where you can see the notes that you've entered. You can nudge them, you can transpose them, you can change the velocity, you can do automation, you can do lots of stuff. It's a great, once you get used to it, it is a really convenient sequencer. So you've got that option. You've got the step sequencer, which I showed before, which is not as useful or convenient as it should be, but it's there. And then you've also got this option, list edit, which is something like a tracker, which again is not as useful and convenient as it could be, but it is there, which means you've got a list of all your events. You can go in, you can add stuff, you can change it. So it's quite flexible in that regard. So in terms of note entry and sequencing, the Live II means that I don't absolutely need to take the key step. I should just say in terms of key entry, note entry, something I have used before for that purpose is the Sonicware Live and XFM, which I'm showing here. Now I've spoken about the Live and XFM before, and I've said one of the things I don't like about it is the way that the sound design aspect of the synth is so separate from the sequencing. And that's something I can talk about more later in the video. But in some ways it's very convenient. It's portable, just showing it in terms of size comparison to the MPC Live II. It's probably about 2/3 the size. It's a lot lighter, a lot lighter. It takes batteries, I think it's six AAs. Yeah, it's got 6 AAs there. And One of the good things about it is it's got full size MIDI in and out, and it's got this clicky little keyboard, which is not as bad to play in a push as you might think. And if I had to choose between them purely for note entry, I would rather use this keyboard than the pads on the MPC Live. But put against that, it's another box to take. And so I think what's emerging from this is that even though the MPC Live is not necessarily the best option in each of the categories that it competes in, it's so convenient having everything in a single package, even though that is quite a big package comparatively, that it was able to win out over those options for recording and for note entry and for sequencing. For recording, it would be even better if it had a built-in mic. That would be great. For note entry, it would obviously be preferable if it had a keyboard. I've had a look at the MPC Key 37, for example, which does have some advantages. However, it's a lot bigger than the Live II. And I think if you're going to take the MPC Key 37, it's not battery powered either, so it's less convenient in some ways. It's a lot bigger and it's not battery powered, so I prefer the Live II from that perspective. And then the sequencer, I've pointed out this, in some ways the step sequencer is a bit odd, it's a bit inconvenient, and the list edit similarly is limited. And plenty of people complain about the grid, that you've got these different modes up here. You can't, I'm on this kind of resize option where it's easy to zoom into notes, but then if I want to actually interact with the notes, I have to choose a different option there to select. It's not like the modern phone touchscreen where you can do everything in one mode. And then there's other basic things like there's no way to delete, clear everything. It's still slightly clunky, but once you get used to it, it's great for you can do pretty much everything that you'd want to do with a sequencer on that. Apart from if you're getting into more detailed conditionality, it doesn't do that. It does have a basic probability function for each note, but you can't tell it to do that note 75% of the time and that note 25% of the time, for example. You can't get into that kind of level of sequencing. And there's no random feature. There's no built-in MIDI LFOs. Those are all areas where the sequencer could be improved, but for my purposes, it's a great sequencer. It does the job. So we've talked about recording, we've talked about note entry, we've talked about sequencing. Let's talk about the most important thing, which is the sound source. Now, I've done videos looking at the OPX4 synth, which is built into the MPC Live II. It's one of the plug-in options. Let's just show that. There you go, that's OPX4. As I say, I've done videos looking at the sound of the OPX4, and to me, there's something about the sound that I don't like. There's something about the UI which I don't particularly like either. So I have tried to go away with just the MPC Live II before and use OPX4. But although it is an FM synth, it's not the kind of FM that I like the sound of for some reason. And I couldn't really get on with the UI. So unfortunately, OPX4 doesn't cut it for me, which is a real shame, because if I had OPX4 and was happy to work with that, then this one box would be all I'd need and I could leave everything else at home. But unfortunately, that's not the case. So let's just look at some of the other options. So Live in XFM, I've spoken about before. Just like OPX4, it is a 4-operator matrix FM synth. I think it sounds great. It sounds really, really good. But again, so the sound is great. The way the sound design is so separated from the sequencing, I don't like the fact that there aren't traditional LFOs in the XFM or modulation envelopes. Once you get out of sound design and into the sequencing mode, there are workarounds. It does have potential to do that kind of thing. You can morph between 2 patches using an envelope or an LFO, so it does have some great potential in that regard, but it's quite an unusual way of working, and it's not one I've got used to. So for that reason, the XFM is not really one I've been able to live with. And again, if you put these 2 boxes together, that's quite a big package. I do like the fact that it's multi-timbral in theory, but again, you need to use the sequencer to get into that. And so it's not, from that aspect, it doesn't cut it for me. So let's look at some other options. Here I have the Casa Synths Genesis. It's the DAFM Genesis YM2612. And I've done a couple of videos on this synth as well. And again, I really love the sound of this synth. It's the original chip from the Sega Mega Drive, which you can see there through the clear plastic window. It sounds great, it sounds absolutely amazing. Really lo-fi, dirty FM, 4-operator again, just the kind of sound that I like and want to work with. It's really, really good from that perspective. In general, I like the UI for sound design. The only issue I have with this, and I've spoken about this on previous videos, is that the patch management at the moment on the current firmware is a complete pig. If you want to create patches and load them into MIDI channels, you're going to need a computer, basically. And to even load patches onto MIDI channels, you need to send MIDI CC messages, which you can do from the MPC Live, but you need to send bank and program change messages, which is a bit of a pain. I don't understand why you can't do everything from the synth itself. And so for that reason, that just the painful nature of patch management, I decided not to take the DAFM, which is a shame because it's small, portable, in theory it's multi-timbral. It should be a great option, but at the moment it's just let down by the patch management system, so I didn't take that. So what I did take is this synth, which I've acquired relatively recently, which is the OPL Studio from Cheerful Electronics. Now, let's just compare it to the DFM Genesis. Now, I have done videos talking about these before. I did a video relatively recently after I just acquired both of them, and I hadn't really given them enough usage, particularly the OPL Studio at that point, to talk about it in detail. But I've now had them each for a month maybe, or even longer than that. So, and I've used the OPL Studio a lot more now, so I feel like I can talk more about its strengths and weaknesses. So, this is the synth that I took away with me with the Live II, and the background music that you can hear is actually what I came up with while I was away, and I was quite pleased with it. I had a bit of a disaster because what you're listening to is quite simple. I came up with it in one session, I saved it, went away, came back to it, and I worked on it some more. I made some more parts, I made it more complex than it is at the moment. But for some reason I didn't save that session on the Live II, so it's lost. So it's just one of those things, which is a shame. But I actually got quite into working with the OPL Studio and the Live II together. I think they make a very good package using the sequencer, the multi-channel MIDI sequencer of the Live II to feed MIDI notes into the OPL Studio, doing sound design on the OPL Studio while I'm hearing the sequence playing. Once I've made the patch, I can then allocate it to a MIDI voice and continue sequencing and continue working on the sounds and the music that way, which is really good. So sequencing with the Live II, recording from the OPL Studio into the Live II, using a balanced cable. Now, I've spoken before about the screen whine noise, or the USB noise that you get from the OPL Studio. Using a balanced cable solves that almost completely, so it's not an issue anymore. One problem I've had, well, there's a few problems I've had with the OPL Studio. I've spoken before about some of these issues. It's not a complete instrument by any means at this point in time. There are some niggles, some bugs that need to be worked out of the firmware. I've had it restart on me a few times, including while I was away. One thing I will say is that I've got and you can't really see it there, but I've got a micro SD card in the OPL Studio. So when it was initially restarting on me, it was quite painful because I was losing everything I'd done up to that point, which fortunately wasn't very much because this was soon after I got it. But now that I have the micro SD card in there, it seems like it's auto-saving. So before it shuts down, which it does still do, unfortunately, when you don't want it to, it seems to save the sound design that you've done. So when you start it up again, you haven't actually lost anything, which makes it less of a problem. It would be great if it didn't restart occasionally, and I'm emailing the designer, Martin Jansen, about that, but it's not an issue as it was originally. So that's the micro SD card. It uses micro USB for both for power and for MIDI, and that is great. It's very handy. It means I don't actually need to take a MIDI cable. I actually got where I was going, and then I thought, oh no, I've forgotten to bring a MIDI DIN cable. I might have to try and buy a new one. But then I remembered that you can do MIDI over USB, so that's perfect, really convenient. So you only need the power cable and the balanced cable for the sound, getting the audio from the OPL Studio to the Live II. Now, one issue I've had is that in theory, the OPL Studio output is stereo. You've got right, center, or left output basically for each MIDI channel. In theory anyway. What I wasn't doing, and I'll do a separate video looking at the mixer and how you actually do the detailed sequencing and mixing, etc. on the OPL Studio. I wasn't doing that in this case because I couldn't work out how to get the pan coming from the OPL Studio over the cable into the Live II. And I tried various options. I tried using the balanced cable. Obviously that's not going to work because it's just taking one channel essentially. But I did have with me this splitter cable, which in theory should take a stereo channel from the OPL Studio and then send it to two mono audio channels. When I had the cables with me to do that, I'll just show one of them here. So in theory, I should have been able to do stereo out of the OPL Studio into the Live II. Now that didn't work. I mean, one reason it didn't work is because as soon as I started using those cables, I was getting the USB noise and the screen whine. So it wouldn't have worked anyway doing it that way. But also I don't think I could get stereo using that arrangement. So in the end, I just tracked everything out separately in mono to the Live II as separate audio tracks actually, and did it that way. I say audio tracks, actually I was using the looper rather than the audio recording. And that's something I should have touched on when I was talking about the audio recording abilities of the Live II. You've got the sampler, which is one way of doing it, but when you are using MIDI sequenced music and you're trying to line everything up, the two options, the sampler's not going to work really, because you either trigger it by arming it and then starting record, or you can have it so it auto records when it crosses the threshold. But obviously that's not going to work when you want everything to be lined up. So for those purposes, you've got this looper, which is great. But unfortunately, it only goes up to 16 bars. So if you've got a loop that's longer than 16 bars, then it doesn't work for that. And that can be an issue where you've got a sound with a long release tail, for example. Even if it's only a 8 bar, 12 bar loop, if you've got a really long release tail, then 16 bars is going to cut it off. So one thing I've worked with recently is the audio tracks, because again, those are synced to the record button. And I can't remember why I haven't used those much before. I think there's some issue with you've got a limit of the total number of audio tracks that you can have at any one time. But once you export the audio track as a sample, then you can just work with it in the step sequencer like any other sample, and that's fine. I didn't need to use that in this case because I was only using quite basic 8 bar loops from the OPL Studio, and the looper worked fine for that. So that's just a very kind of broad overview for anyone who's in a similar position, similar dilemma to me, looking for a small, portable, really great sounding FM setup. I think the OPL Studio sounds great. I've done a separate video talking about the OPL Studio. Obviously it's based on the old OPL 3 chip from Yamaha. There's 2 of them in there. Sounds really great, really dirty, old school. Combine that with the ease of use of the MPC Live II, and that is the option I went with, and I'm very pleased with the result. So hopefully that's been useful or interesting for people. If you enjoyed it, please give me a like and a subscribe. I don't know if I said this at any point, but obviously the background music you're listening to is what I actually came up with when I was away using this setup, just for interest's sake. So I'll probably just let that play out at the end of this video. Thanks very much for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video. Goodbye.